Yes, we're good to go, Chairman.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to, I think, the ultimate corporate governance meeting of Daventry District Council, soon to be no more. And I've had apologies from Councillor Harrington Carter. I'm not aware of any other apologies. I would like it noted, first of all, my thanks to Sarah, who has left us due to the changes in the political composition of this committee, and that we also wish Audra well, and hope that she has a speedy recovery from COVID-19, and we welcome Richard in her stead, who I'm sure will tell us all of the financial secrets that Audra never tells us. The first item on the agenda is to confirm the minutes of the last regular meeting, which was held on the 24th of September 2020. Can I ask those who were present to confirm they are content with the minutes as being an accurate and true record of the meeting? Aye, thank you. And therefore I'm really content sometime in the future when I'm next in Daventry to sign these minutes on your behalf. Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 3, as we've already dealt with apologies. Can I ask that all members present declare any conflicts of interest with regard to the agenda later on? Please do so at the time of the agenda items. I'd also like now to welcome Neil Harris, who is here to represent Ernst & Young and tell us why he's not given us a written report and why he's only here giving us a verbal report for the extortionate amount that we pay Neil. So welcome, Neil. It's lovely to see you again. So over to you, Neil, if you'd like to take us through the 1920 accounts audit.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bunting. Can I start by wishing you well? Obviously, sorry to hear of your circumstances and of Audra too. I wish you both a speedy recovery from COVID-19. The reason for the verbal update is this Corporate Governance Committee had already received a audit results report from myself last year that set out where we were up to on our audit of the Council's financial statements and the value for money conclusion for the financial year ended 31st of March 2020. Our audit was substantially concluded at that stage, and I think the committee agreed to take delegated arrangements for the final sign-off and approval and publication of the accounts when the remaining aspects of the work were finished. The reason why I've been invited to give a verbal update today was just to bring this committee up to date on where we are in concluding the audit. There are 2 substantive items to finish, both of which are outside of the control of Daventry District Council, but are important before I issue my audit opinion. The first is that we receive assurance from the Northamptonshire Pension Fund auditors, and it's called what's called IS 19 assurances. The work on the pension fund audit is substantially concluded. There's been a lot more work this year looking at the valuation of assets post-COVID and the judgments and estimation and uncertainties associated with those. And I am anticipating that we'll be receiving the IS 19 assurances by the end of the first week in February. Linked into that, there is a piece of work to conclude associated with disclosures in the final set of accounts associated with going concern. Now, going concern looks at your situation in terms of viability and liquidity 12 months from the proposed date of the auditor's report. Obviously, this committee's was very well aware that after the 31st of March, Daventry District Council no longer exists, and it will merge into West Northamptonshire Council. Now, the approach that we've taken and is consistent with professional standards is that we would still expect to have a disclosure associated with the assumptions associated with liquidity and viability for the West Northamptonshire Council, covering the period of going concern. So if you consider that going concern looks 12 months from February, that would look at the budget and cash flow position as of February, March next year. Now, Martin Henry, who is the Chief Financial Officer for the West Northamptonshire Unitary, has provided a statement to me setting out the basis upon which the 21-22 budgets are being prepared for the unitary, the basis on which he asserts that council will be able to operate as a going concern, the position on the budget, and also the position associated with cash flows and treasury management forecasts. Now, that was based at that statement was run prior to Christmas last year, and I have a conversation with Martin on Friday to get the up-to-date position as of now, and then I have to run that through a professional practice consultation process to make sure that we've responded appropriately to review the assumptions contained within the budget and the forecast cash flows, and that we're content that the disclosures represent fairly the position of the incoming unitary, and that statement is reflected in each of the sovereign body accounts for the 1920 financial year. That exercise is underway, and I also anticipate that will be concluded by early to mid-February. So I anticipate that by mid-February we will be issuing the audit opinion for Daventry District Council. And we'll have a good working arrangement with Audra and Richard. So I will continue to update both officers on the resolution of those items. And should this extend any further than mid-February, then clearly I'll need to update members of this committee, because I'm sure it'll be in the interest of this committee and for the members of Daventry District Council for this audit to be concluded before the vesting date. So, and that's something that's very clear in my mind. I would like to get this audit concluded well before the 31st of March, not least that Richard and I have had dialogue about how we turn our attention to the 2021 audit to the sovereign bodies accounts as well. So, Chair, that's the reason why I'm here not giving a written report, on the grounds that there's nothing new in terms of the specifics on the Daventry District Council audit that I felt were material and significant enough to present in a written report. But I did think it was appropriate, and I think the officers agreed that I was here just to explain why we hadn't yet signed off. And I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Neil. Colleagues, do any of you have a question? Shake your head, put your hand up, whatever. There's not many of us, so we can deal with that. I think it's, given the position of the pension, we're completely understandable. We're still awaiting for the valuation there. And obviously going concern has become much more of an issue, particularly since the regulations changed and there were the issues around the pandemic. So I've no other questions on the 1920 accounts. I would like, though, if I may, just to go slightly off-piste, I know that always worries Tony, that to understand how the accounts for 2021 for Daventry District will be dealt with, and who will be scrutinising Daventry's audit and accounts process post the vesting date.
Okay, is that a question for me or for the officers, Councillor?
I think it's a mixture, really, because I feel that it's appropriate that we as the governance committee understand that.
Absolutely.
And that we don't just wash our hands of the situation because we've moved to a unitary, because clearly as councillors we're essentially accountable, as are the officers, up to the vesting date, which of course includes the post-vesting date audit of activity.
I can certainly say from an audit perspective that we still clearly intend to undertake the external audit of the sovereign body accounts for the 2021 financial year. What we will be agreeing with Audra and Richard is how we can do that as efficiently and effectively as possible. And I think the first step we need to understand is the continuity of personnel that will be available to support the audit after the 1st of April, and making sure that our audit is timed in to get to make that audit as efficient and effective as possible. One of the things we also need to consider is whether we do our audit in one visit, given the position that everybody's in at the moment and the ongoing impact of COVID-19 that's going to have on practitioners for this year, not least then the transition to unitary. My starting position is it would probably make sense to undertake the audit in one visit, as opposed to when we sometimes do it over 2 or 3 stages during the course of a year. That's what I'm going to be proposing in many places, but I want to make sure that our resources align to when we've got the officers available but I appreciate there is some degree of uncertainty around that, given that there is a lot of appointments that are being made at the moment to assistant director positions and structures are being finalised. And off the back of that, I'm sure then there'll be an agreement as to how across Northamptonshire each of the sovereign body accounts are going to be prepared and what teams are in place to support the auditors. But you can take my assurance is that, unlike the position that we're in now some time ago, our resourcing we will have a better position to resource these audits. So that's the position from our perspective. But I understand your question, Councillor Bunting, on the governance and scrutiny of our work and of the accounts that are prepared, and I'm probably looking to the officers to give you their position on that, and I'd be happy to make any other observations once I've heard those answers.
Before I ask Tony to come in, Kevin, I think, has a question.
Yeah, just related to the audit, will there be an end date when the audit would need to be completed by?
I suppose not necessarily. I think we're all keen to make sure that we safeguard quality, but at the same time get to a point when we've caught up across Northamptonshire and actually do get to move into auditing the two new unitary councils, because there's a risk of a lot of overhanging audits. Obviously, you've had your 18-19 accounts now signed off for some time, but there are still organisations in Northamptonshire that have not had yet their 18-19 accounts finalised, let alone 19-20. So there's a considerable period of considerable activity still needed to make sure all of the final sets of accounts up to 2021 have been concluded. If I just consider the position for Daventry, our expectation within EY this year is that we're resourcing our audits up to get concluded by the end of September, where it's within our control. Obviously, where it's outside of our control and there are higher risks, that may not be possible, but that's what we're intending to do, not least that we're anticipating the regulations might change this year to say that the target date for publication of the accounts is the end of September for this year and for next year. But MHCLG are still to consult on that, but that's our working assumption at the moment when we're planning and scheduling our work. But that might not be the case across the whole of Northamptonshire for the reasons that I've said. There may be other entities, sovereign bodies, that are not in that position. But for Daventry, that would be my target, Councillor Parker. But in terms of your question about is there an actual end date we should be aiming for, I don't think that's set in stone, other than to get this done as quickly as we all can while safeguarding all of our respective standards.
Tony.
Yes, Chairman. I'm not sure I can give a definitive answer in regard to the governance arrangements and the DDC's input to the production of the final accounts. Clearly, DDC won't exist as a sovereign body from 1st of April. But we will have a team on site here who will be used to dealing with DDC's accounts. And it is my expectation that those individuals will work through the normal processes to provide the set of accounts and work with the auditors to have those done in pretty much the usual way. As to how that's going to be managed, Neil sort of made reference to the recruitment process that's going on at the moment for the senior management team within West Northants Council. Until appointments are made and we understand how those managers wish to organise their teams and the work, it's difficult to offer any more than that in terms of the officer involvement. Other than to say that we are already considering programming in some work, and Neil's mentioned the possibility of doing a single visit, or maybe there will be 2 visits, and that's still to be decided. But potentially we'll be programming some time in to deal with that.
And how will the scrutiny and oversight of the accounts be undertaken by the elected officials?
My best guess on this is that there will be an audit committee formed for West Northamptonshire Council, and that audit committee will pick up the audit of the accounts for all the sovereign bodies going into West Northamptonshire. Okay.
And I'm sure some of my colleagues will be standing for election at that time. So I hope you will put yourself forward for the audit committee to make sure that we keep Neil in check and Richard honest, as it were. Super. Do we have any other questions on item 4, colleagues? No? And then on that basis, Neil, I think we can thank you for your input and hopefully we'll be able to sign those off before the vesting date for 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I can then move us to item 5, Scott, internal audit progress report. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Members may recall way back now in May when you approved the annual audit plan, and that original plan was devised on the basis of there being an assumption of no resource issues that would impact on it. And primarily we took that approach to be able to set a benchmark, really, with which we were able to then assess any impacts, and in particular the events from primarily coming from the pandemic. If members take a look at the table that's in paragraph 4.3 on page 10, this is the table that I produced for my last progress report back in the meeting in September. At that time, there was a redirection of audit resources that amounted to 108 days. And you can see now, even given trying to reduce some of that impact, it has extended further up to the end of December to an amount of nearly 155, 156 days. Now, at that point in time, back in September, there was the redeployment of the senior internal auditor, and that arrangement ended sometime just after that meeting. But primarily, the work in terms of advice and support that we've provided to management has continued, and significantly the support that my team has provided to the business support grants process, which has gone through a number of phases since May. And I think we're sort of keep having this period of lockdown and closure of businesses, which has then enabled us to then kickstart things again. So that has been quite a continued process during the year, and continues as we carry on towards the end of this financial year. One of the things I discussed with the Executive Director of Finance was how we could try and mitigate that so that we could start that focus back on internal audits. So what we agreed sometime just before December was to increase the hours of the corporate fraud officer to full-time and have that officer dedicated to dealing with the pre and post-payment assurance that was required for the business support grants. And that arrangement is working quite well. And what that's done is it's enabled us to really kickstart the internal audit plan back again and really get some of those audits driving forward. Ultimately, though, even the position we're in now, there is going to be an appreciation that we will not be able to achieve all of the audits in the plan. And if you move over to paragraph 4.7, you will see, as at the end of December, the position was that I'd already determined 2 particular audits, the human resources people management one and the planning obligations around the community infrastructure levy were 2 audits that I decided at that time needed to be either cancelled or deferred. Conversely, though, during the year, we still have to account for any emerging risks, and you'll see down in paragraph 4.8 the introduction of 2 new audits. During the year, Council determined a project for the acquisition of properties for temporary accommodation. So I agreed with the Section 151 officer that we would do some work on that area to provide that assurance to senior management, and that was positive. And similarly, there has been another new process in terms of a new system for income and deposits for unexpected travellers' emergency stopping places. So, you know, whilst there are some audits that have to be cancelled or deferred, we are still looking at things from a risk perspective and drawing new and emerging risks and bringing that into our workload. Despite all of that, the forecasted position is still increasingly difficult to predict with the second wave of the pandemic, and also the preparations for the new unitary council. And as we've just discussed earlier, the post-financial year-end requirements that might be required to satisfy the closure of the DDC financial accounts and any internal audit work that might support that. The detailed work that we've undertaken to date is in the Appendix A to the report. So there's a level of detail there which you can have a look at and certainly ask me questions. The table if I draw members' attention to page 13, the table that's in 4.14, this is probably this is a table that appears in all of my reports and even the annual opinion, and you will be quite familiar with it by now, and this will be the last time you may see it in this format. Despite the number of audits that we've undertaken to date, we haven't identified or given an audit opinion yet of minimum assurance on any, and I don't envisage that to be the case with the workload that's left, given the fact that we are now picking up a lot of financial systems work. The ratios you can see there. Certainly, if we look at the two bottom ones in terms of our recommendations in this current time still being dealt with, you can clearly see the high priority one there is at 100%, and we're pretty much nearly there as well with all the other agreed recommendations. So that work is still continuing, and that was something that during the year when we almost got to a bit of a pinch point as we came towards December, and senior management team at their meeting in December provided that or discussed the issue of audit resource and give us that assurance that they were certainly supportive of internal audits being undertaken under the current climate, but with the understanding that obviously there are pressures that are coming from delivery of the Future North Lancs programme. That's all I'm hoping, or all I'm intending to discuss in detail, but I just wanted to touch on two particular areas that we are picking up. If you look at the paragraph 4.21 on page 14, you will see that there was a period of time when we discussed it back in September that we hadn't started any IT audit work. And certainly for me, critical with this, it's a heightened risk to the authority really that arises from the level of in-year change that has taken effect, and certainly the where we're now mostly working from home. So we have now instigated and there's two audits on, one on cybersecurity and one on remote access to the DDC networks and systems that is currently started. And I was conscious that we needed to get that work started, and that's what management have been quite supportive of.
Thank you, Scott. Do any colleagues have any questions for Scott on what looks like could be quite a diverted programme from that which he originally put to us around the COVID activity? Kevin? You're muted, Kevin, which is always a good sign. This is like being in a seance, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Anybody there?
I'll get some sensible answers if I'm muted. Yeah, thanks for this, Scott. And it's probably a bit late in the day now, in all honesty. But I mean, I did flag up in September that I was concerned about the audits and things like that and the resources you'd got. And it looks like you didn't get the extra resource to December, to be honest with you. Looking forward, I mean, we're only talking 8 or 9 weeks. You've got sort of 5 audits that have started in Q4, 7 in progress, 2 in planning stage, which are IT, and some contract procurement projects as well. Do you think you'll have enough time to finish those by the end of March? That's my question. In other words, do we need to look at it again, or are you comfortable with those which are there in the plan, which will be finished?
There are a number of audits in the pipeline at the moment that are being completed. We're going through the process of that and trying to push them forward. There are certainly 4 of 6 audits that remain to be started, and 4 of those 4 are financial systems audits. And I think one of the things I'd probably like to say to members is, although we may struggle to get all of that work completed, we will do what we can. But at the same time, I think members can take comfort from the year-on-year audit opinions that I've given, and the trend of that, and the what assurance that is given to members to demonstrate that there is really a strong cultural environment of governance, risk and control within the council. That doesn't go away, you know, with the pandemic. Yes, there are pressures that are asserted, but we are certainly trying to put the audit resource into the areas that we feel are required between now and the end of March. And that's all I can really say, really, in terms of there is an expectation that we won't complete all of that work, but then we're also looking at the new council and in terms of the sovereign council audits that will have to be absorbed into that process as part of the development of the new authorities. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I think we're saying you'll carry on with the audits, but some will not actually be completed at the end of March. I think that's what you're saying.
That's correct.
All I would say is there some you could actually not do, but complete the others, in other words? So you didn't have this, oh, we finish at the 31st of March and 2 or 3 were outstanding, as opposed to, hang on, everything was done. I know that's difficult. I appreciate that's very difficult.
Yeah, that's the process we're going through at the moment. We're trying to determine which of the financial systems audits left, trying to determine that with the managers from the finance team, to determine which ones of those are more of higher priority in terms of that transition to the new authority.
Thank you.
Other questions from colleagues? Well, Scott, thank you for that. It's very reassuring to note that the table on page 14 is remarkably positive after we started so low down all those years ago when we first instigated the ratios. So credit to you, your team, and to management for picking up the cudgel at the appropriate times and moving that forward. So unless anybody's got any other questions on Appendix A or the paper itself, I suggest that we move to item 6, risk management process, and ask Tony to take the lead, please.
Sorry, I was on mute there.
Couldn't hear you, Tony.
Yeah. I think you just need to resolve the previous item, Chairman.
Sorry, Tony. Thank you for reminding me. I said my brain was slightly befuddled. So could I ask the committee to resolve the progress towards the achievement of the audit plan and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and the future Northants programme? Are we all content? Please show your hands. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you all. Thank you. Unanimous, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Risk management progress, what will have been used to in previous years to see alongside this report is the strategic risk register, and we are generally starting the review of the risk register to sit alongside the corporate plan for the coming financial year. Clearly, you haven't got that this year, and that is because there is no strategic risk register for DDC, or indeed a corporate strategic plan for DDC. So I just want to point that out first. In terms of the progress, then we've continued with our normal practice of meetings, and we've continued to keep a close eye on the strategic risk register during the course of this year. And we've heard already from the previous report and indeed from Neil's presentation, the impacts on the organisation of COVID response and the Future Northants programme have been immense. And it's felt, particularly in context of those two issues, that we kept perhaps a closer eye on the strategic risk register during the course of the year than maybe we would have done otherwise. So there has been regular reviews by the risk management working group, and also the risk management working group is referred on to SMT, and there's been a bit of backwards and forwards with that to make sure that we were covering the issues that we needed to within the strategic risk register. So although we're not going through a major review now, we have kept it under fairly close review during the course of the year. The other two elements picked out in the report are the service risk registers. We're continuing to run with service risk registers sitting alongside our service plans, and any issues of significance coming through those have been highlighted then to the risk management working group. And as I mentioned, the risk management working group has worked closely with SMT this year, looking at the strategic risk register and reporting backwards and forwards on that process. So in conclusion, we've continued to manage risks appropriately. I believe good progress has continued to be made during the course of the year. In terms of looking forward, and the Unitary Council, work is being developed now in terms of a strategic risk register for West Northants Unitary, and certainly any risks that are identified through our strategic risk register will be fed into that process. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Tony. Any comments from colleagues on the paper on risk management progress and the position that Tony's outlined? No? I think I'll have to get this to resolve this, that the risk management progress is noted and the current approach is endorsed. Could I ask colleagues to indicate visually if they're content? Thank you all. Unanimous again. I have not been previously notified of any other urgent business. As this is our last meeting, may I hope that all four of the officers present have secure futures in the new structure, and wish you all well. Can I thank all of the members and the officers for their contribution to the committee over many years that you've had to put up with me. And I would also like to thank you all for being kind to me with my idiosyncratic chairmanship of the committee. And as this is our last one, I will wish you all well, and hopefully I will see you all at the final council meeting, all being well. So thank you all again, and thanks for working with you. Cheers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.